So a while back, I made a video about haiku, and ever since then, I've been thinking about that video. And I feel like I've made a few mistakes that I want to address. So in my other video, I said that these sort of things sort of make up a good haiku. So a good haiku will be about nature. It will have sort of two parts that are sort of related but are sort of contrasted to each other. It'll have very vibrant imagery. It'll be short. It'll be based off of an observation of the author. It'll have a koreji, or a cutting word, that sort of cuts the poem into two parts. And it will have a seasonal reference. And I said a good haiku will have either all or at least some of these characteristics. And I said that these things are what make a haiku a haiku. I mean, I wish I would have stressed vibrant imagery more. I don't think I even really talked about it. But having good, like really strong image in the reader's mind is a thing that can make a haiku better. I also said in the last video that I spelled seasonal wrong. I also said in the last video that there is no English equivalent to the seasonal reference. I mean, there are some things that can be associated with certain seasons. Like if I say like April showers, that's like a thing that's associated with spring. There's just not as many things in English that are associated with the seasons. Like remember in the last video how I said that the word moon in Japanese is associated with the fall. We don't really have as many words that are associated with seasons in English. So it's a little bit more restrictive in English, but you can have a seasonal reference. I mean, there are words that invoke images of certain seasons. So I would argue that there is, that you could have sort of a translation. Then, ever since then, I've been looking around. I looked at the subreddit, the haiku subreddit, and I was looking at haikus on there. And almost every haiku that's on there doesn't really have these things. So for example, there's this haiku that I really like that I found on the haiku subreddit that I'll read to you now. When I learned Morse code, I couldn't get restful sleep. The rain kept talking. I really like that haiku. I think it's really nice. I think it's the image of the rain talking to you through Morse code is really interesting. But does it really fall into, how many of these characteristics does it have? Maybe it's about nature because it has rain in it, but it's not really about nature. My point is that it doesn't really fit into what I was describing last time as what makes a haiku. But the thing is, I still think of this poem as a haiku, even though doesn't have a lot of these characteristics. And that's very interesting. Like, I wouldn't say that this poem is not a haiku. So maybe, I know I stressed a lot in the last video that haikus don't actually have to have the 5-7-5 syllable structure. It doesn't actually have to have 3 lines. But I have a proposal. Maybe a haiku can either have a lot of these characteristics, or it can have a lot of the characteristics that is associated with the traditional haiku structure. So this is where I'm kind of at right now about haiku. I feel like there could be 2 ways a poem could be considered a haiku. It either could be considered a haiku because it has a lot of these characteristics, or it could be considered a haiku because it has the traditional structure where it has 5 syllables in the first line, and then 7, and then 5. And that it doesn't necessarily have to have these things if it has the right structure. I mean, this option where it just has the right structure, but the content isn't really derived from the traditional Japanese haiku, I feel like those sort of poems still will be considered by most people as haiku. So that's kind of like the thinking I have about this. Yeah, I know in the last video, I was really talking about how annoyed I was when people use haiku as a prescriptionist term. Like a haiku has to be this way. It has to have this structure. And I was arguing that, well, no, it should have whatever structure the author finds effective. But at the same time, I was saying a haiku has to have these things. I was sort of being a haiku prescriptionist just about the content of the haiku rather than the structure. But I do, at the same time, I feel like there has to be something that makes a haiku, right? Like does Shakespeare sonnet, right? Is that a haiku? Well, no. I don't think there is anyone that would consider that a haiku. A haiku should have something that makes it a haiku, right? Am I making any sense right now? I feel like I'm just rambling. I also did a community poll on YouTube, right? I did a poll on the community tab where I asked, should a haiku have the structure or should the author be allowed to do any structure they want? And the results were exactly 50-50 for both option. I mean, it only had 2 votes, but that's fine. But I mean, some people definitely think that this is what a haiku has to be. So there you go. Oh, I also kind of wish that I had included haiku that I had written. I didn't include any haiku that I had personally written in the last video, but I am going to in this video, and that's how we're going to conclude. Okay, this is my first haiku that I wrote. Okay, ready? Is this a snowstorm? Or did a man eating rice just sneeze? Achoo! Ah! Okay, that was the first haiku. And this one is more serious. This one's more serious. I like this haiku. Okay, ready? This one's serious, I promise. Snowflakes whisper down. Fall's last lonely crimson leaf. Lost in fallen snow. Yeah, that was a haiku I wrote. I think it's pretty good. It has both of these things, actually. It has the 5-7-5 syllables, and it has a lot of these things. So I was actually really happy with that haiku. Okay, well, that's it.